That's fucking utter slanderous bullshit. And I've challenged everyone to prove it. I believe slander is a violation of the non-aggression principle because it's fraud. It's leading people to believe things that aren't true. Okay, I got all kinds of pushback on that.
Okay, first of all, time out a second. What is the context of that statement?
Just somebody saying something. Oh, well, I'll give you the context, but to me, the context is kind of irrelevant. The statement kind of stands on its own.
I'm asking because it's the first I've heard it.
Oh, a friend, Zach, who comes into my chats a lot, was saying that Dave Smith is bad because he recruits alt-right grifters into the party.
He's recruiting who? Alt-right grifters?
Yeah, and it's
we don't have any congressmen in the party.
But that's the context. And I was like, that's a fucking lie. You know, you saw it. So, but I got a lot of pushback where people are saying, do you really think that defamation of any sort, be it libel or slander, is actually a violation of the NAP? Let me put on my eyeliner, and I want to hear what you think on that.
Well, right now, one of the biggest things in the news is this Dominion lawsuit against Sidney Powell, claiming libel over her claims that that their voting system was fraudulent and hacked and all that other stuff related to the alleged election fraud. My response to that is, okay, guys, if the first and principal defense against libel and slander is the truth.
Well, in this case, though, let me preface. I know truth is an absolute defense. I'm saying if something is actually a lie, I'm not even getting it. Obviously, it's not fraud if it's true.
Right.
What I'm talking about is defamation, actual defamation, saying something like that, saying something either libel or slander that's false. Should that be a crime? Or in some sense, a violation of the NAP, like directly to what I had said.
Oh, it's definitely a violation of the NAP. No doubt about that, because you're right. It is a case of defrauding someone.
Is it? What are they being defrauded of?
Their reputation and their integrity.
Okay,
while that may be considered an intangible thing, it's also part of them.
Is it? Okay, let me just ask. We're not going to get into the IP discussion, but
no,
I think
this is more philosophical.
I think the two issues are related. Do you believe in IP, intellectual property?
Not in the way that you object to it. Let's put it that way. At least the way I think you object to it.
I object to it in every single possible way you can imagine.
I take a more of a perspective on intellectual property from a tangible property perspective rather than a mental thing. That sounds weird, I know, but it's hard to really explain it without going into about an hour.
Because I find most people who think there should be like laws or things against libel or slander, I'm just going to use the generic defamation, generally believe in intellectual property. And the people who don't believe in intellectual property think it shouldn't. I found that breakdown. Because how can you, I don't think you can own your reputation, and I don't think you have a right to your reputation, because all your reputation is what other people think about you. And you can't own other people's opinions, and you don't have a right to other people's opinions.
That's true, but when their efforts to take your reputation and damage it through no legit action or fault of your own, which can then turn around and interfere with your ability to pursue your happiness, get you denied a job that you're qualified for, etc., and so on, then you've got a problem.
That may very well be true, but didn't you just say in the incitement thing that people have a responsibility to verify words?
They do. Doesn't mean everybody exercises that.
But is that the fault of the speaker?
That's not necessarily, but at the same time, if the person on the other end of it isn't verifying it and has the ability to harm someone else's reputation or problem, then they're inadvertently damaging that other person. I've had a case in the past where I had a job that was denied to me even though I was totally qualified for it, because I found this out later, somebody else deliberately made crap up about me to the hiring manager, which made them come back and say, no, without ever asking me whether this stuff was true or not.
I've been damaged by
So,
libel and stuff
and
before.
that was a 6-figure job.
But I don't want to make arguments based upon personal experiences. More, I understand it can happen. There's no doubt. But does that mean there's a right to keep it from happening?
Keep what from happening?
From somebody saying something false about you that might cause other people to think something wrongly about you.
Well, if they do it under oath, it's perjury. And frankly, if it's people making up crap about you that you can't defend because you don't even know about it or you're not even verified, that does harm you. And at the same time, it can cause issues that don't need to be happening in the first place if people were just freaking moral and truthful about it. Yeah, I know there's a question, how do you legislate morality? That's not what I'm getting at.
Well, actually, I think morality is the only thing you can legislate. I think that's a real dumb slogan of libertarians, and I'm going to deal with in another show. But
Fair enough.
It still gets back to, though, you have to have some kind of right to your reputation. And I just don't see where that right would come from. So kind of, I think we can all agree that defamation is morally wrong.
Yes.
So that right there, fine. It's definitely morally wrong.
And that's also why defamation falls into the area of, and correct me if I have this the wrong statement, civil and tort law. Is that?
Yeah. Well,
right?
there is criminal as well, but most of it falls in that.
Yeah.
But there is some criminal ones. And to be honest with you, since I don't work in that area, I don't know the distinction. But mostly it's civil. But there is there is criminal defamation of some kind.
And the legal system has developed a whole web of how that works for various people in various positions, whether you're a private citizen, a public figure, or this, that, whatnot.
And
that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, but I'm just, oh crap! I always do this. But I just, I do think I spoke to. See, I always get it up on my eyeball there. I believe I spoke too hastily on that. So to walk it back. It's definitely immoral. We can all agree upon that. Mm-hmm. But is it definitely a violation of the non-aggression principle? Because to me, things that are violations of the non-aggression principle, you have a right to damages of some sort and a defense of some sort other than just words. You know, because you always have a right to speak. So I think I spoke too hastily in saying that it is actually a violation of the non-aggression principle. What's the remedy?
Well, again, it depends on the circumstances of the thing. And that's going to vary on a case-to-case basis. It could be something as simple as someone being as compensation compelled to publicly apologize and say why they said what they said was wrong.
You can't compel speech.
As a matter of compensation for a wrong, yes, you can.
Not in today's law, and I don't think in any kind of libertarian law you can ever compel speech. That's specific performance, and I don't believe in any.
That's part of the main holding.
You can't. It really isn't. There's no specific performance unless you contracted for specific performance is not a remedy under law. In common law, and I cannot find any justification for specific performance in libertarian theory. The only kind of damages there are that can be compelled are monetary.
And I think I disagree with that assessment. But
that's why if, say, you promise to marry somebody and you renege, you might be able to get monetary damages, but she can't be forced to marry you.
No, but if you're the one who jilted them, you can be forced to apologize to them for jilting
No,
them.
you can't. No, that's never been in any kind of law system that I'm aware of, but certainly not in American.
There's been tons of civil lawsuits where the group found liable and been forced to institute a public apology. It's happened a lot.
They agreed to. You can't force someone to.
No, I've seen judges rule you will apologize to this.
And that's not enforceable.
Apparently it was, because they did.
Just because somebody did it doesn't mean that if they challenged it, it would be enforced. Sometimes people do things because it's the easiest thing to do. Like, I don't believe taxes are just, but I pay them because it's easier than getting shot by the IRS or whatever.
Yeah,
But
it's a non-sequitur, but compared to this, but
you can't. You specific performance is like very considered very loathsome under the law, and there's only very certain contracts, and it's written right into them that specific performance can be ordered, and there's certain real estate contracts that applies to. But when it comes to speech, you can't force speech. There's been no there. I don't think there's. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't work in that area. I work in insurance law, so I would love a lawyer or a judge who's listening to show me where I'm wrong. But from all my schooling that I remember and reading, there's just no, you can't compel speech. And that's the big thing with Jordan Peterson and Canada, where he didn't mind, where I thought he should mind other things. He didn't mind certain speech being prohibited, but he lost his mind when they tried to say he had to say certain words. He's like, he didn't have a problem with saying you can't say certain words, and I think he should have.
yeah.
But the minute they told him he had to say certain words, he lost his shit.
Because part of compelling speech, and this is the other side of the coin, is if you're compelling speech, then you can also be arguing that you're compelling what is not said. And the opposite and the flip of that has already been proven in law. You cannot compel speech, like for the Pledge of Allegiance, for example, in a public environment, because you're forcing someone to agree with something they may not necessarily agree with. And maybe I'm arguing against myself here.
You are.
But at the same time,
but that's okay. Sometimes you have to do that.
Yeah, but under law and under contracts also, what is not said is just as important and just as viable as what is said. And that goes into a different argument about what the bylaws committee has done, all that stuff. But the point of it is that that's well established that you have to, what you say and what you don't say both matter, and that makes a difference as well. So maybe I am wrong. Maybe you can't compel it as much as we'd like.
You can ask. You can certainly ask and have that as another remedy that a lot of people would prefer to do rather than pay money.
Yeah.
Because they'll go, I'll just fucking lie and say I'm sorry.
Yeah.
See, money is truthful. Like when you get your $100,000, you have it. When you get your apology, you don't know that they mean it.
Well, yeah.
Most
of the time, what people don't.
Right. So yeah, I.
There are a lot of people in this world that will mean an apology, but they're not. I don't expect to get it.
Yeah.
Because A, they're not going to be sincere about it, and B,
they're too proud anyway.
And no, they're too oblivious. Because they don't understand why they should apologize.
Well,
they don't understand why there was a wrong there.
So, so I think I'm walking.
You know some of the people on top.
I do, because I'm in the same boat with them.
Yes.
So I do think I'm walking back that it's a violation of the NAP. But I'm wondering if there's some circumstances in which it is. So let's just say I'm walking back from my blanket statement that it's a violation of the NAP. Now.
I think the argument that it's a NAP violation has to do with the fact that slander and libel themselves are fraud, because they are defrauding because they're lying, and lying is a form of fraud.
But what are you defrauding them of?
That's where it gets tricky.
Right. And is all fraud a NAP violation, or are we using the word fraud more broadly?
This goes into the question of, is the NAP based upon the action itself alone, or does it also include the object of that action and the effects? And I don't know the answer to that question.
I'm not even quite sure what you mean. I would need like specifics.
Well, okay, the action itself. Let's keep on the slander thing. The action itself of slander.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that is lying about somebody, and you could argue that lying is fraud. That's the action itself. What you described a second ago was about the person that is the victim.
Right.
Okay. And what was actually damaged of theirs. That's the object of the action and the effect.
So in other words, what you're saying is, if I stood alone in a room and said a false thing, it's still false, but it doesn't matter because nobody heard it.
Right. It's the tree and falling in the woods argument.
Right. Like I can sit here and say all kinds of things about anybody but if nobody heard it, I'm still saying something that's not
Yeah.
true, but
Is it a question of just the action, or is it the question of the action plus the harm? That's what I'm getting at, I guess. Does that make sense?
well, in order for
Both ways?
something to be a NAP violation, there has to be a harm.
Mhm.
So I guess that answered
Maybe it is.
that question. Um, because it's very context dependent. Like, we talked about the watch question before. If you see someone taking a watch from somebody, you don't know if they're retrieving their own property or if they're stealing. You have to know more about the situation. But is it some? I'm just still trying to think of a situation where it would be a NAP violation, and I'm thinking in cases of where I can think of one where it definitely would be fraudulent inducement, where you. But that's not really slander. That's just
That's
lying.
just fraud. Yeah.
Um,
I had one of those in an ad that showed up on my feed
Yeah.
the other day, but that's another story.
I think we could all agree that fraudulent inducement is, but that's not. That's like lying about the quality of a product or something like that. It's not necessarily. Well, no, there could be fraudulent inducement where you're lying about a person.
Mhm.
If we're talking about hiring, I suppose, um, where somebody is considering between two applicants and then they're trusting you to give accurate information and you denigrate one falsely.
Mhm. Or something as simple as lying on your resume.
But who is the one that was harmed? Is it the denigrated person, or is it the person that you were talking to that relied upon you to give the accurate information?
On that case, if I'll use the lying on the resume thing as the example. You're hurting yourself by making yourself make out something you're not, which eventually comes back and bites you. But at the same time, you're hurting the company who hires you because you're false pretensing it, and you're not bringing skills or experience to the table that they're looking for or may think is important. And it also makes the person who did the hiring look bad because of not having the appropriate judgment or cognizance to check all those details in a way. So there's harm to those folks as well.
But that's not defamation. I'm really trying to
it's not
stick.
really defamation, but it certainly has a negative impact on them.
Yeah, but I'm talking about lying about somebody. Like, I'm really trying to.
Lying about yourself.
But it's lying in a good way. I'm talking about putting somebody
But
down.
is that really a good way?
Well, you're not saying things bad about yourself.
No,
you're fluffing yourself.
Right, but you're not being truthful either.
No, but I'm dealing with. I'm really trying to stick with saying bad things about people that aren't true.
Okay, fair enough.
And I'm trying to find a good lipstick. And
I don't denigrate people when I'm that are hiring that I'm competing against, because half the time I don't know who don't even know what's happening.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, you went with somebody else. Fine, that's just life.
So I'm gonna see if there's comments because I hit those, and maybe there's some. Okay, let's see here.
Actively fraudulent versus passively.
Yeah. I mean, I am definitely walking back my definite statement.
Is there anything above that?
Yeah.
Just more about Dave Smith.
Yeah, and then it's talking about the sex work and all that. Okay.
Right.
Okay, defamation case by case. Yeah, I agree there. I want to put this on screen because I don't like the people who are watching not to get to see it, and I agree we don't need more spider web policies, but I'm just trying to think of clear cases where it would be a NAP violation, and I'm not so sure I can come up with them, but I'm not yet so sure I can't either. But I can definitely think of ones where it's not. Like, for instance, that case where I was speaking with Zach, and he, I felt, was lying about Dave Smith. Was that a NAP violation, that specific case?
Is there evidence to disprove his claim? Or let me rephrase that. Can he prove his claim, or can it be disproven? Let's put it that way.
I don't think it's
because if it's proven, then it's not a slander.
Well,
if it's disproven, then it could be. Again, it goes to the effect of what harm is on it. And again, I'm getting more and more into that argument, more and more of that position that yes, it does matter what the harm is and the object of the statement is.
Okay, well,
At the same time,
let's make up a fake
I'm
person.
slowly walking myself in that direction because as the more we talk
Yeah.
about it, I'm kind of I don't want to say evolving my point of view here.
I'm totally evolving my view.
It's developing. Okay.
Well, let's forget about Zach. Let's say there was some guy there named Luke that I was talking to that said that that Dave Smith had an affinity for fucking sheep. Okay. I'm just saying.
I'm sorry, but that's funny.
It's not Dave. I'm sorry.
It's probably not true, but it's funny.
I made that up.
It's
okay,
an example of the absurd, but yeah.
Right, and it was false because it is. Is that then a violation of the NAP? If Luke said that about Dave and it was false,
okay,
is that a violation of the NAP? I would say no.
At that point, no. But if somebody then uses that later on to
do what?
To sully him in public, deny him a job.
Okay, let's start
with prosecute him for
husbandry,
etc., and so on. Then you're.
Did you say husbandry?
Well, I was trying not to say bestiality. Okay.
Yeah, but that makes it even worse. I know that's not what. Is that where that term came from?
Apparently. I don't know. I don't know, and I'm not going to go there because anything I say will get misconstrued by somebody.
Okay, no, but no, let's deal with one at a time. Sullying his name in public.
Yes.
Well, Luke already did that if he was on my show saying that.
Yeah.
And we said that wasn't a NAP violation.
No, you said you didn't think it was. I'm still thinking about it.
Oh, I thought you agreed.
I said I'm still working.
Okay. Well, I don't think so. And I'm trying to think of where it would progress into one. What? So if it lost him a job, I'm not so sure because I think the employer has some sort of duty to verify things.
They do, but they don't always do it.
But that's their problem then.
It is, but a failure to dutifully act on their own behalf, and that is their own behalf in this case, to verify the information, and it also causes harm to the individual along the way that's a whole different discussion about.
But what is the harm? Was Dave owed that job? Did he have a right to it?
No.
See, you see where I'm going?
Right.
Like the employer could have not hired him just because he didn't like the name Dave.
Yeah.
So,
frankly, if that wouldn't be someone I would want to work for anyway, but that's another story.
It's
because that's shallow, petty, and absurd.
But I'm still trying to. I'm not so sure that's actionable because he had no right to the job.
See, that raises the other question: does the violation of the NAP does it have to be something that's actionable?
Yes, I think so.
Why? I'm not.
Because it's aggression.
I'm asking for the reason.
Because you can always defend against aggression. A violation of the NAP means that somebody committed aggression against you.
Yes.
And aggression always justifies. It doesn't mean you have to respond. Yeah. Some sort of proportional response.
Where's Dr. Roar when we need her? She could really give us a good conversation.
Well, I know that Block and Rothbard had all said that there's no NAP violation or law broken with libel, slander, or any of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to have to struggle with this for a while, but at least I did correct my kind of...
We're in a lot of deep nuance here.
Yeah, well,
and that's good. That's good.
Yeah, well, that statement was kind of hyperbolic because that was kind of getting under my skin.
There's a rhetorical one up there.
Yeah, let me see. And then we will be getting ready to go downstairs. Let's see here. Okay, so James asks, I like putting it on the screen, what if you call someone a white supremacist and it costs them their job and leads to violence? Okay. Does an employer have the right to fire somebody because even if it's not true, because they don't want to have the kind of people that draw people that call them false names? Does it matter? See,
say that again, please.
Okay. Let's say an employer wants the type of people to work for them who are just milquetoast and don't have a bunch of enemies, and rightly or wrongly don't inspire people to call them white supremacists, whether they are or they aren't. They do. They have a right to fire somebody for being called a white supremacist, whether they are one or not, because they just might not want that controversy and don't care whether you are one or not.
Sounds like Google.
But I'm just saying that was his scenario, and I again, it and it says it cost them their job. You don't have a right to your job.
Well, the real question I have there is, it says it leads to violence. What is that?
That I
that?
don't
I
even
don't understand what that refers.
Well, I'm going to get to that part. I want to deal with the job part. If you're unless you have some kind of contract, in which case, then I think the employee would have a case against the employer for breach of contract, and it would have really nothing to do with the person who called them a white supremacist.
Well, no employer in their right mind is going to come out and fire somebody because they were claimed to be a white supremacist.
Oh, God, yes. I think plenty of people have gotten fired because somebody on the internet called them a white supremacist.
No, but the employer is not going to out say that's the reason why.
Oh.
Because that leaves them wide open for God knows what, for wrongful termination lawsuits and God knows what else.
Depends on what kind of state. In Florida, that's totally right to work, so you can fire people for anything.
In Colorado's an at-will state, and you can fire them for anything too. But that still doesn't mean you can't. That there are certain things you can't fire them for. You can't fire somebody for their opinions. You can't fire somebody for their state of being in certain ways, like being a gay or being a male.
No, there's certain protected classes, but you can fire them for their opinions. You can fire people for their political opinion. It's completely legal to do that.
I haven't seen it yet.
I've seen it. In Florida, I've seen it. That's why I try to keep my political opinions out of my job.
Well, that's why I do it too, because frankly, there's.
Well, yeah, you're in a little bit of a different situation too, with the type of work, but you can.
It's also a case of, while people will talk politics on the job, and the career field I'm in is much more conservative in a lot of places. At the same time, it distracts from the work.
But yeah,
software in terms of what's in the code is apolitical, and if it is not, then you're in bad mojo, because then you have things like what's happening with Dominion.
But your political opinion's not a protected thing. You definitely can be fired for your political opinion. So it leads to violence. That I'm not so sure. That gets back to the incitement.
I'm not even sure what that even means in the question.
I think they think somebody hears that you're a white supremacist, so then they beat you up.
Or the other way you can look at that is say, oh, it'll cost you your job, so you went postal on them.
Oh no, I don't think that's what he means.
That's the case either. But
no, I think
the question is vaguely worded. I could see an interpretation either way, and it's like, what?
No, I think it's pretty clear. I think he means somebody assaults you.
Yeah.
In which case, there though, that gets back into the incitement thing, and I would put the blame on the person assaulting you. If they just assault you because some Joe Blow on the internet or whatever called you a white supremacist with no evidence, you have personal responsibility. So I don't. That person does.
Okay, then let's take that argument that person A says you're a white supremacist. Mm-hmm. That makes employer fire you, so you lose your job, or makes person C get
punch
pissed off by that and punch you in the head. Okay, let's flip it around. You're a bartender.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing your job. You're serving drinks to somebody. You stop serving them.
Mm-hmm.
They leave. They drive drunk. They get in an accident. They hurt or kill somebody. Okay, that drunk driver is the one that committed the harm.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the bartender liable?
They shouldn't be.
Exactly. So that, if we want to put it for that perspective of direct responsibility for an action, which is what I believe in anyway, fine.
No, I know.
Again, I might be agreeing with you here. It's possible. But
I know the law says differently, but I don't think the bartender should be responsible.
The law never said the law made sense.
Yeah. And Mallory is doing what we're doing. She says every scenario. Let's put this on the screen. Every scenario she went through her head comes full circle where she has to oppose it. Right. It's a big Pandora's box. And I'm not really too sure yet. And I'm never too proud to say when I don't know.
Well, this is a lot of in-depth and nuanced conversation about what's under the hood on these things, and having that conversation is fantastic
And
because it
here,
really does make you stop and think.
what about the examples of kids who got into college and are slandered, resulting in their admission being canceled?
Oh,
Are they entitled to go to that college? I mean, it's just like asking if you don't get a job.
it's not. Well, it's not really. No, they're different. Okay, because on the entitlement of not of the so-called entitlement of having a job of getting a job, that's one thing. But in this case, they're already in school and they're already paying for it. They're already paying for that education, and then to have somebody just destroy it with because based on innuendo and false claims. And I understand what that's like, having been dragged before a college honor board when I was a freshman, even though their arguments were totally absurd.
But then the case would be against the college.
Yes,
Right. It's not against the slanderer.
right.
Because
But
we're talking
but the
here.
college acts as an arbiter of that issue and can result in a person being expelled for that accusation. And then the result of that is that, okay, well, I was wronged and I'm getting screwed for it, but they're keeping my money. And frankly, if they're going to be screwing me over, they need to kicking me out. They don't have a right to keep that.
Well, but again, your case isn't against. I'm really trying to keep this narrow of it being damages or a law against the person who uttered the lie. In this case, you would then have a case against the college. It's not the person who lied, because the college, after they had your money, there's a certain contractual duty between you two where they should have to investigate and prove it and not just believe what somebody said.
And a lot of times that hasn't been happening.
But then you would have a case against the college,
Right.
though. It's not
Yeah.
against the slanderer.
Yeah.
So again, I guess the only conclusion I'm coming to here is that I definitely was wrong in saying that it's a NAP violation. And I'm now very unclear as to whether it ever would be, though I haven't ruled it out. But each case we've brought up, I haven't found it yet.
Mm.
So this
Bring up that second to bottom comment right there. That one. Yeah.
He changed his mind, I think, but he had said it was the person who had done the slandering would be responsible, not the employer.
Which raises the I want to mention that because it raises the question then: is the employer, or to extend it to the college argument, the college?
I think those two are similar, very similar.
They're similar, but I'm paralleling here on purpose. Does that mean that their failure to properly investigate, adjudicate, due process, however you want to describe it, is that, setting aside whether you have the right to that in those private settings or not, does that make them guilty of aiding and abetting the slanderer?
No, I wouldn't think so at all. I think that's really
Even if
a stretch.
they willfully choose to not do it.
No, I don't think so. I would think that's my instinct, but I don't think so. Gotta take down my mirror here because I gotta plug in this. And I said it's very similar with the school as with the employer. I can't see up here for my plugs. I take that back because it actually, I think, is quite different. I gotta turn this light off 1 second so I can see under here. The employer, if you had an employment contract, that would be similar to the school. But if it was just an at-will relationship with your employer, they don't have any kind of duty to investigate the allegation. They can fire you for any reason they want to, except for. And now we're also, forget about the except for, because I'm trying to deal with this actually in Libertopia. So unless you have a contract in Libertopia, there are no protected classes. They could fire you because they've all decided.
That's because in Libertopia, classes don't exist except for one class, which is the individual.
But just saying, they could wake up that morning, decide they don't like black people, and fire you because you're black. Yeah. They would suck. Hopefully people would take some kind of free market action. But they can.
And that's interesting. Just a sidebar on that. That's interesting because you're right. I agree with you completely. The thing of it is that you have people in the party who have tried to shift things to the left, where the left believes that can't be the case.
Well, they're wrong.
I know they're wrong. But why, at the same time, it's like, well, if you're trying to shift people to the left who actually believe this, are you going to try to shift the party position on that to reflect that left and go against our fundamental principles?
Plenty of people have. Nick tried that a
I
little
know,
bit.
and that is something I have a serious objection to.
Oh yeah, me too. Well, and listen, there, excuse me, because they made these statements publicly, don't have a problem saying people who actually have said the party position should be the one way or the other.
Advocation of it, that's one thing, but yeah.
No, I meant that this actually brings up a good point. And here's why I'm really reluctant to say that even any case of libel is a violation of the NAP. Once you start getting into words being a violation of the NAP, it's not a big step to then start to buy into that leftist idea of microaggressions and things like that.
True.
So I do think that in our haste where we have this knee-jerk, which is a good knee-jerk, but knee-jerk distaste for liars and defamers, yes, that we have to be real careful of the unintended consequences of making words violence or aggression, which would be the better term, but same thing.
I can make words violent. Just smack your head with a book. I'm kidding. Although there is
this isn't the cult of R&R. Try to keep things very focused here.
Of course not. I wouldn't smack the head with Roberts.
So yeah, so that's also my reluctance, because if libel is a violation of the NAP, then it just my blanket, very wrong-headed statement. Then words are aggression, and that leads to all kinds of things we wouldn't like. And now it's bringing up even more. Let's see what else everyone is coming up with. This always has to be an interactive discussion. So put James up here. He meant where he said the slanderer would be responsible. He meant in terms of losing your job. If the person who slandered could predictably know it could result. For example, people doxing someone to their employer. That's an active slander versus just calling someone a name like a racist.
I'm glad he made it. I'm glad he differentiated between active there versus what he was asking about passive earlier.
But again, I mean, there's definite intent there for you to lose your job, but if you're at will, I don't know. That's an interesting case. I don't know. My gut after all of this discussion is to say no. Don't work for cowards. I mean, if someone's going to intimidate an employer like that, I think it's more on the employer. But they had a good comment here. Mallory did. I think a lot of people forget we still have the ability to outcast immoral ideas and action without laws and policies. Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm trying to get at.
Until censorship prevents you from.
Well,
but that's another story. That kind of brings it back full circle to
well,
Twitter
the censorship is an immoral idea in action a lot of the times.
It is.
So, we have to find ways to oppose it without laws and policies is kind of, I think, is what she was getting at. And James says, my makeup looks amazing. Thank you. Okay, and the issue of economic harm is hard to wrap around my head. I hate saying that because I need to put it on the screen. When someone goes out of their way to lie or slander directly to someone's employer. That's the situation where I'm not so sure I have an answer on yet. I would let me tell you, here's where I'm getting hung up. If it's an at-will work state, or situation, because we're dealing with Libertopia, no contract, they can fire you for whatever reason they want. They could wake up in a bad mood and you can't sue their wife for putting them in a bad mood that day that caused you to lose your job. Now, if you have a contract and they fire you without, invoking you better negotiate a good contract, but and somehow violate that contract, you might then have an action against both people there. You definitely would have an action against your employer, but you might have an action against the slanderer there and it's not for the slander, I don't think, or the slander would be tangential. It would be for tortious interference with a contract, which is a little different.
And while there's a whole different question about whether or not at will is no contract or not, because when you sign a job offer, you're also agreeing to all their terms of conditions of employment.
I've never signed a job offer in my life.
That's the norm in my business.
It's not the norm in mine.
They don't send you a letter saying we're offering you this position for that. Well, for me, that's normal.
No, and I can tell you, in my before my prior husband became a police officer, which was the end of our marriage, but he had worked at a lot of different places, and he never ever had to sign a job offer. He worked in trades, in construction, and in installing home security systems and that sort of thing.
In the jobs I've had all my 24 odd years working software, every single one of them has had a formal written offer.
No, none of mine have, and
every single one of them has said, this includes following our policies and procedures and this, that, and the whatnot, and so on. Every single time.
Well, that's a little bit of a different situation than I'm talking about.
The question is that a contract?
I don't know.
I don't either, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't either. But
I'd have to see it.
That's a whole different discussion.
On the face of it, it doesn't, but I'd have to see it.
Right.
And contract laws in each state's a little bit different. And again, we're kind of talking about
it in multiple states.
Yeah, in Libertopia anyway.
That's like I said, that's a whole different discussion.
Yeah. But one other thing I wanted to bring on here. You know that group on Facebook called the Fakertarians?
I've heard of it, but I haven't.
Yeah, they're the Jerry Springer of the Liberty movement. In other words,
we have a lot of those.
No, this is the worst because it's like an organized thing. They're basically the ass boil of Liberty.
Again, there's a lot of those.
Yeah, but this again. So one of their big brains, they're very big brained. And they also
is that a sarcastic term?
It's very sarcastic. So one of the big brains there with that clip I did had thought, they got me because what did I say slander in there or did I say libel?
I don't remember.
Well, whatever it was, okay. Well, they were...
One's written, one's spoken, but they're effectively the same thing.
Right. Libel is written, right?
I think so.
I remember... Slander is spoken, libel is written.
Correctly, slander is spoken, S and S versus the other one, which is...
Okay, yeah. Right. So the big brains there thought that they got me, and they're like, and she's a paralegal. Because Zach's comment was typed out in chat, and put on the screen.
Yeah.
And I called it slander. And they go, she don't even know that's libel. The big brains. And what the big brains don't know is that those two things in the age of the internet have started, it's not clear-cut law anymore.
Yeah, it's blurred.
What?
It's blurred.
It's totally blurred. Because when you write, if you're talking to a host of a show, and you write and you know that this host puts it on the screen and then reads it, is it your intention for it to remain in writing? Or was it to be spoken?
Right.
So there is cases on this.
How often colloquially do we say on posts on the internet, reread what I said?
Right.
Versus reread what I wrote.
So it's the big brains really.
I tend to say reread what I stated.
Yeah.
But,
Well, the big brains thought they got me, but... and then I would ask the big brains, does that then mean that people who have a voice box problem or whatever and can't speak, they're incapable of committing slander if they write something down and ask someone else to read it?
Somebody who has a cochlear implant, who has a computer screen which takes the words that are spoken and puts them on the screen so he can see them.
Does that then become libel instead of slander?
And we're talking about a certain radio talk show host that we're well aware of. I'm not going to name names.
So
But still,
it's
point of case.
yeah.
It's gotten blurred.
Those distinctions were made in a time when there wasn't mass communication.
So and it was in a time when the internet didn't exist, and there was a much more clear distinction between the written word and the spoken word.
It's back where if you said something, and the whole reason there were the different penalties is if you said something, very less people would hear it. You were in a small town generally, and some people would hear it. But if you printed something, it had the ability to reach more, and that's
the print was larger circulation.
Right.
And as technology improved with audio recordings, that changed a little bit, and it's progressed over time, you know, and it just keeps slowly progressing to the point now where it's so blurry.
The difference is it's just dumb. And I do think where I think the law is going to go on that is to either get rid of the term libel and call everything slander because that's the more common word, or get rid of both words and just call everything defamation because that covers both.
I think that's more where it's heading.
Right. So I know the big brains, they thought they showed me. And funny too, the big brains over there also said that I exude small dick energy. And what I said is, well, I hope so, because I thought that Wayne would be very, very upset if he looked in my knickers one day and there was a big dick lurking in there, you know?
I'm sorry. That's just hilarious.
I know. It's like, but this is big brains people, Mike. We can't possibly understand them. It's the big brains.
These are the people who can't find their way out of a paper bag when you spot on three sides in the bottom. Yes, I know.
And so there you go. I figured I would do my little Fakertarians moment, though I have dubbed them the Fuckertarians, but just so we all know. So I'm a small-dicked paralegal, apparently, who doesn't know the difference between libel and slander because the big brains said so.
I am not going to touch that one with anything because A, we're not married to each other, and B, that's none of my business.
Well, but let me tell you, I'm really upset. No, I'm not. So I would like to give my...
Okay, that's glitter, not crocodile tears. Okay.
See, but I wanted to give my official response to the Fakertarians or the Fuckertarians. You ready?
Yes.
That's my official response.
Oh, you half-assed it.
I had that. Well, this one I broke a fingernail and I didn't want to show it.
Oh.
Plus, listen, go on this and sit it on it.
There's always the Spaceball salute.
What's that? Oh, well, I got to fix this nail, but yeah. And these are nice claws too, so I sit on it and you'd really not have a good time.
How the hell you type with those things.
All right, guys. So I think we are, let me make sure there's no other comments. This went way longer. So let's see. Hold on. I got to put on my glasses. Yeah, that group is nasty, isn't it? They're horrible. I just block them all. The problem is that my friends think they're doing me a favor and they send me screenshots. And in a way, they're doing me a favor because then I know who else to block. But in general, like, I honestly don't care. Apparently, I drove somebody out of the party who was part of the Fakertarians, and he was on Twitter saying I drove him out. And you want to know what my response was? Is, who are you? I don't even know who you are to drive you out of the party. But
and further, it's like this is not an airport. No need to announce your departure.
Oh, Mallory wants to know the lipstick. This is fantastic. You have seen the ads for this. This is great lipstick. This is, have you ever heard the brand Be Same? So it's vintage colors that got reproduced, from like World War I, World War II era. So yeah, it's a lovely, I love it. And this color is Victory Red. And that was a classic red. Mm-hmm. Like the We Can Do It lady was wearing the Victory Red. All of the riveting girls were
Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah, we're wearing this. So it's Besame, Besame Cosmetics. What they also have is Cake Mascara. Mm-hmm. Which is fantastic. So I did the spill. All right, everyone, we're going to be going.
One more comment.
What? Oh, yeah. Takeaway is verbiage with policies need to be updated before we are stuck in this we don't know situation. Well, with libertarians, we're always going to have some we don't know situation, I think.
Yes,
but
that's part of the unpredictability of life.
all right, y'all, we're going to go do our rest of our day, and I want to make sure I close this out properly. Thank you for hanging out.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business, not because they want to